Welcome to the Siljander Podcast, where you will find actionable tips, tricks, and strategies for the millennials. In this show, we will dive into content that will teach you how to live with more ease, confidence, and authenticity. Here we will start with a foundation of compassion for ourselves, and then spread that compassion to others. We believe that this chain of acceptance and fortitude can radically change our families, communities, and beyond. And I am your host, Laura Siljander, yoga teacher, mental health coach, outdoor enthusiast, and lover of red wine. So grab your headphones and get ready to learn, grow, and to be inspired to live a life filled with intention and wellness. If you like the show, follow me on Instagram at practice_compassion, or check out my website, laurasiljander.com. I am so glad you are here, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, and welcome back to the Siljander Podcast. Y'all, I have tried to record this podcast about 4 times and interrupted by dog barking, not putting my phone on silent. I have some gentlemen here working on the roof. Have you ever had a thing like that where you're just trying to get it started and you just can't seem to get past the first step? Well, I'm going to push through and persevere, and I'm going to record this content for you because you're here for it and I want to deliver. It's funny, it's February 7th right now, if you're listening to this when it came out, and it is 78 degrees outside. In February, I made myself a hot cup of tea that it doesn't seem very appropriate for the weather. I should be drinking iced tea. However, this tea is so good. It is called Good Earth, sweet and spicy, and it is delicious. It is a cinnamon flavored tea. So if you don't like cinnamon, you're not going to like it. But if you are that type that likes a little bit of spice in your life and your drinks, I really recommend trying it. Again, the brand is Good Earth and it's sweet and spicy. I buy it bulk off of eBay, so each cup is maybe 15 cents. So completely worth it. And my last podcast was about money, honey, and this is something that is relatively inexpensive that brings me joy. So best of both worlds. It's inexpensive. It makes me happy. I feel like that is a very fulfilling purchase. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you can go back to the last episode and listen to the podcast, Money, Honey. But let's get to the content for this week. As usual, I had a different topic in mind, but then it morphed into something else. I am learning how to tile my outside screened-in porch, and as I was grouting, which takes forever by the way, I started thinking about misdirected anger. And this is something that I see all the time. If you don't know what misdirected anger is, let me paint a picture for you. So let's just say that you're having a horrible day. You wake up late, you didn't sleep well the night before, maybe you spilled your coffee and that made you late to work or class or your appointment, and that's just how your day is going. And to top it all off, maybe you got into a fight with your spouse or your best friend or your mom, and life is just not great right now. So you're on your way home, feeling all upset and uptight because it was a bad day, and we all have them. And this punk in front of you is driving 5 miles under the speed limit. I mean, what are they thinking? It's 5 miles under the speed limit. Don't they have somewhere to go? So of course they're in the left lane. So you speed over in the right lane, drive up to them, look over, and of course you need to look over and see what they look like. And then you give them your best scowl, speed up, and get into the left lane right in front of them and think to yourself, ha, take that. Have you ever played out a certain situation like this because you're upset about something else and the person or situation in front of you is in your line of fire and they're gunning the brunt end of your bad attitude, even though they had nothing to do with your horrible day? But they're in your line of fire, so they're going to feel your wrath. Sometimes we do this to the ones that we love. Sometimes if we had a really bad day, we take it out on our best friends, our roommates, our kids, and our spouses. And I am totally guilty of this as well. The other night, I didn't have a good evening and a good day, and I walked in through the door, saw that there were dishes in the sink, automatically got really annoyed by that as well, started washing the dishes, and when my wonderful wife walked in, I had the guts to tell her about how I'm the one who's always washing the dishes. Now, I was just taking out my anger on her. It was completely misdirected. She had nothing to do with the horrible situation that happened to me earlier that actually wasn't that horrible, and that's what misdirected anger is. Misdirected anger is when you or I are hurt or angered by something or someone. And instead of leaning into the emotion, we stuff those emotions down and go about our day, and then we take it out on someone else. That's what misdirected anger is. All those emotions we stuff down, we suck up, and we don't deal with, and then we explode. I like to talk to my clients about when they get so angry or so upset, but they don't say anything or process anything, and they're like a kettle on a stove, and that stove is turned up to medium, and the water in your kettle is getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and then it bursts and that whistle occurs. That's just like when we don't deal with these annoyances or these emotions, we get hotter and hotter, and then we explode at whoever is in front of us, and it's not fair to them. If you have ever been on the other end of this, where you are feeling the wrath from someone else's misdirected anger, you probably know what I'm talking about. I think everyone should work in the service industry in some capacity in some time in their life, because that is a career where you encounter misdirected anger, but also you encounter misdirected insecurities. So if you're a waitress or a waiter somewhere and you have a person there who's ordering their food and they're just treating you like crap, then obviously they've got some insecurities there that they're taking out on you. Or if you are a loved one and your spouse comes home from work annoyed and then you get the brunt end of it, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And just a gentle word for you, if this is you, is that it's not your fault, and it's only because the other person is in pain, and that's why you're getting treated that way. It's not you. I'm not saying that their actions are okay and you should just take it. I don't believe that. I'm not saying that. But if you internalize that and think all people are bad and all people are going to treat you horribly and that you don't deserve this, and then you kind of get bitter about it, then perhaps you could be dealing with some misdirected anger, and then you could turn around and hurt someone else. I sometimes think the first step is to tell yourself when someone's treating you really poorly. Step 1, remind yourself that you do not deserve this treatment. The next step is to remind yourself that pain that they're putting on you has nothing to do with you. It is all them. And to not embody their pain and let them believe that this is your fault, because it really is not. And step 3, you stick up for yourself. You don't excuse that behavior just because that person's having a bad day. I'm a firm believer in holding people accountable for their actions. And if someone's treating you poorly and unfairly, you should stick up for yourself. And there are many strategies that we can go into about how to stand up for yourself with compassion, with gentleness, with kindness, but with also firmness. If you want more strategies like that and you want me to do a podcast about that, reach out to me on Instagram, DM me, whatever you want to do, and I'll go into that if you're interested. Okay, so let's go back to when you or I experience misdirected anger. I want to give you some easy, actionable steps that you can take when you realize this is going on. But the first thing you need to notice is actually step 1. Identify when you're partaking in misdirected anger. Identify when you're mad or when you're angry or annoyed. A good way to start is my wife and I usually check in with each other the first thing in the morning with, how did you sleep? How did you rest? And usually that's a great place to start, such as last night, I did not rest very well. So I know that today I could be more privy to being a little bit more short-tempered. Maybe I'm a little bit tired. Maybe I crave carbohydrates a little bit more because my hormones aren't completely stable because of lack of sleep. So this is a great place to start with checking in to see how you're doing throughout the day and not being judgmental or critical, because when we feel that unpleasant feeling, like I'm feeling really annoyed right now, we want to get rid of it really quickly and distract ourselves with our phone or with conversation or with games like Candy Crush. We're all guilty of this. Or if we're at home, we'll turn on Netflix or we'll surf the web just to distract ourselves from our pain. But it's okay to admit that you're not doing so well. And some ways that you can get better at identifying with how you're doing is to introduce some contemplative practices in your life, such as mindfulness or yoga. These are practices that help you pay attention to how your body and your mind are doing because they work together. All my clients, I teach them mindfulness. It's the foundation of almost everything. And that you can learn again in yoga, or maybe with a therapist, or looking into mindfulness on YouTube and starting to teach yourself as much as you can. Our body is a great tool. It alerts our minds if there's something right or something wrong. When we feel anxious or scared, our bodies tend to tense up. Our heart rate increases. Maybe we get clammy. Maybe you feel fear and anxiety in a different way. But our body sends alarm bells to our mind to say something is not okay. And you get really good at this when you start introducing these different practices. So step 1 is learn how to identify your emotions and check in with your emotions. And be okay to sit with your emotions that aren't pleasant. Step number 2 is to process these emotions. Now, we're not always going to have time to indulge in our coping strategies because we're in the middle of a meeting and something fires up, or we're in the middle of a conversation and we can't leave. So let's say that you're pretty angry, you're having a bad day for whatever reason, and you're in a meeting and something just sets you off, and you can feel step 1, your body sending your mind alarm bells. I'm getting mad, I'm getting tense, my heart rate's speeding up, my hands are clammy. Number 2 is to take a deep breath, to inhale through your nose and to exhale out of the mouth, and to do this at least 3 times. This is something that you can do to calm yourself down. So instead of reacting to the situation, you can respond. And when we learn to breathe like this, we kind of play around with our nervous systems here. So if you are taking those short, shallow breaths like this, that indulges in the sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight, flight, or freeze. That is somewhere where you don't want to go, because that's when you become really reactive. When you take a deep breath in, that engages the parasympathetic nervous system, that relaxing part of your nervous system meant to digest your food and to help you rest and chill. When you take deep breaths, you are sending that alarm bells to your body and your mind to chill out so you can respond rather than react. So this is a great way that if you're in the middle of something, you can calm down and respond on the fly. But this doesn't get you out of that yet. I would put that in your pocket, that hey, I felt really angry at this moment, and save that processing for later. Everyone processes things differently. If you are a journaler, it's really great to write it down. I felt so angry today, and this is what happened, and this is why. It's a great way to process. Does that make sense? So processing on your paper with yourself what happened, rather than shooting darts with your words and your eyes when you're mad. I don't process so much writing down sometimes, as I like to process things when I move my body. And that is during yoga. I also like to run, and I'll pound it out on the pavement, and I'll figure out my emotions there. If you're not a runner, maybe you go for a walk. But when I'm doing this, I don't put on a podcast and listen to things. I really want to sit with myself. So that's a really good way to process if you are a mover, is to move your body and process it that way. If you're a writer, you can write it in your journal. If you like to talk it out, then find someone who you feel comfortable with and talk it out with them. This will take some experimenting, figuring out what strategies work best for you to process so you don't word vomit all over people and misdirect your anger towards someone who has nothing to do with your bad day. And even if it's the person who did really make you angry, you're probably not going to get anywhere if you're misdirecting your anger or directing your anger at them. And that brings us back to that whole, instead of reacting, but responding. And so sometimes it is okay if you can walk away, but if you can't, that's when those deep breaths really help. And if you don't mind, I would love to go through a breathing exercise with you. So there's something called Dirga Pranayama. It's a 3-part breath. It's a yogic breath, and it's a 3-second inhale, 3-second exhale. So I'll demonstrate. So obviously I exaggerated it a little bit and made it louder just so you could hear me, but it was 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. I read that Navy SEALs do 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. But lately I've been doing a little bit more research on breath, and this newest research has shown that the most bang for your buck in your breath is actually during that exhale. So I've been teaching my students to inhale for about 3 seconds and exhale for 4. So let's do that together. So inhaling for 1, 2, 3, exhaling for 4, 3, 2, and 1. And doing this a few times. And this should calm you down. If you've never done any kind of deep breathing exercises, something I also have my students do is I'll place their hands on their bellies and I'll ask them to do this. And with deep breathing, your belly should inflate on your inhale, and then your belly should flatten out a little bit during your exhale. And that's when you know you're getting those deep breaths in. And this is something that you need to practice, and then it becomes a lot more natural over time. Okay, so that is misdirected anger. Now that I've kind of introduced this ideal to you, you may see it more and more. And you'll see it when you're doing it. You'll see it when other people are doing it. It's kind of this interesting new lens that you now can see the world through. When people are treating strangers poorly, it's obviously not the stranger's fault. It's misdirected. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Leave me some feedback on Instagram if you'd like. I'd love to hear from you. And practice compassion, y'all, with yourselves, with your friends, with your family, and hopefully that makes a more compassionate community. I'll talk to you next week.